My name is Frankie T. Wilson, and I am 28 years old. My parents forgot my 28th birthday, then bought my sister a new house the same week, so I cut them off and moved away. Months later, they reported me missing, only to find out I was living a much better life without them. I have one sister, Jessica, who is 25, and growing up, it was always painfully obvious that Jessica was the golden child while I was more like the practice kid. You know those families where the first child gets all the trial and error parenting, and the second gets the polished version. That was us, except in my family, they never stopped treating me like the rough draft. Jessica got ballet lessons, piano lessons, art classes, and expensive summer camps. I got told we could not afford extras. Jessica got a brand new car on her 16th birthday. I got a lecture about responsibility and a bus pass. Jessica's college was fully paid for, right down to her sorority dues and her study abroad semester. I worked 3 jobs, took out loans I am still paying off, and taught myself how to swallow disappointment before it showed on my face. For a long time, I tried to explain it away. I told myself parents learn. I told myself maybe my mom and dad had simply figured out money by the time Jessica came along. Maybe they had matured. Maybe they loved us equally and just expressed it differently. It is amazing what you can convince yourself of when the truth is too ugly to sit with for very long. I graduated college, got a decent job in marketing, and kept trying to maintain some kind of relationship with my family, even though every holiday, every visit, every dinner left me feeling like an outsider who had somehow wandered into someone else's home. They never did anything dramatic enough to justify a big confrontation. It was death by 1,000 tiny cuts. A forgotten detail here, a dismissive comment there. Jessica's achievements always got center stage. Mine got polite nods, if that. The breaking point came on my birthday, March 15th. I am not someone who needs balloons and surprise parties and a restaurant full of people singing off-key, but a simple happy birthday text from your parents feels like the bare minimum, right? The day came and went, and my phone stayed silent. No call, no text, no email, nothing. I waited until the next day, thinking maybe they would remember late and call with some embarrassed apology. Still nothing. By day 3, I was hurt, but if I am being honest, not entirely surprised. This was par for the course with my family. They had a way of making me feel foolish for wanting ordinary affection, as if expecting to be remembered was somehow too much. Then exactly 1 week later, I saw Jessica's Instagram post. There she was, standing in front of a gorgeous 2-story colonial house with a white picket fence and a glossy red door, holding a set of keys like she had just won a game show. The caption read, "Surprise! Mom and Dad bought me my dream home as an early housewarming gift. I can't believe I'm a homeowner at 25. Hash blessed hash, best family ever hash, dream comma true." I stared at that post for 10 full minutes. A house. They bought her a house. Not helped with the down payment, not co-signed, not we pitched in a little. They bought her an entire house, and they could not be bothered to text me 2 words on my birthday. There are moments when the truth becomes so clear it almost feels like an out-of-body experience. That post was one of those moments. Suddenly, every excuse I had made for them over the years curdled and fell apart at once. I could practically hear the old lies collapsing inside me. They were not forgetful. They were not bad with emotions. They were not overwhelmed. They knew how to show up. They just did not choose to show up for me. So I did what any rational person on the edge of emotional combustion would do. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, cheerful and warm in that effortless way she always sounded with Jessica and with strangers. "Frankie, honey, how are you?" "How?" I almost laughed at the timing of it. "I'm fine, Mom. I saw Jessica's post about the house. That's quite a gift." "Oh, yes," she said brightly. "Isn't it wonderful? Your father and I found this perfect little starter home, and we just could not resist. Jessica has been working so hard at her new job, and we wanted to help get her established." Jessica had been at her marketing coordinator job for exactly 4 months. I stood in my kitchen gripping my phone so tightly my hand hurt. "Mom." "Yes, sweetheart? Did you realize you missed my birthday last week?" There was a pause. A long one. Not confusion. Recognition. The kind of silence that tells you someone knows exactly what you mean and is searching for the least damaging response. "Oh, sweetheart," she said finally, her voice dipping into that soft, regretful tone she used when she wanted forgiveness without consequences. "Was that last week? I'm so sorry. Time just gets away from me sometimes. We'll make it up to you." I looked out my apartment window at the parking lot below. at a man loading groceries into the back of his car, at an ordinary life, moving along outside while mine felt like it had just cracked clean through the middle. "You bought Jessica a house," I said, "but you forgot my birthday." "And now, Frankie, don't be dramatic. Those are completely different things." She said it so casually, so confidently, like the problem here was my tone. "You're right," I said, and I could hear my own voice turning colder with every word. "They are different. One costs about $300,000, and the other would have cost you 30 seconds and a text message." She sighed, the way she always did when I forced her to look at something she preferred to glide past. I said I was sorry. "What more do you want from me?" That question just hung there. What did I want from her? I wanted to matter. I wanted them to remember me without being prompted. I wanted to feel like I existed in their world as more than an obligation they occasionally mismanaged. I wanted my mother to hear the hurt in my voice and be devastated by it, not inconvenienced. I wanted my parents to love me with even half the energy they poured into Jessica's life. But I knew better than to say any of that out loud. In families like mine, naming the wound only gives them more practice pretending it is imaginary. So instead I said, "Nothing, Mom. Don't worry about it." Her voice softened, suddenly cautious. "We love you, Frankie. You know that, right?" "Sure." That was what I wanted to say. Just one thin, hollow word. But even that felt like too much effort. "I have to go," I told her. That night I made a decision. I was done. Done being the forgotten daughter. Done being the one who got crumbs and was expected to call it a feast. Done being grateful for the bare minimum, while Jessica got entire houses handed to her with a bow on top. Done pretending that all of this was normal or forgivable, just because no one had ever raised their voice. Some people think family estrangement starts with a huge fight, a slammed door, a dramatic declaration. Mine started in silence, a silence so complete it finally told the truth. I decided I was going to disappear from their lives and see how long it took them to notice. But I was not going to do it halfway. If I disappeared, I wanted it to be real. First, I blocked all of them on social media. Mom, Dad, Jessica, a few aunts and uncles too, the ones who treated gossip like a civic duty, and would absolutely report back to my parents if they saw a single clue about where I was or how I was doing. I did not post a dramatic goodbye or some passive-aggressive quote about protecting my peace. I just quietly removed myself from their digital world, the same way they had quietly removed me from emotional importance years ago. Next, I changed my phone number. I had already been thinking about switching carriers for a better deal, and suddenly that practical errand felt almost symbolic. A new number, a new line, a new way for the world to reach me that did not include the people who had never really heard me anyway. Then I made the bigger moves. I had been considering a job change for months. A company in Portland had been trying to recruit me, and I kept hesitating because it would mean moving all the way across the country from Ohio. New city, new apartment, new job, new weather, new everything. Before, that had felt terrifying. Now it felt perfect. I accepted the offer. I gave my landlord notice. I sold most of my furniture. I started packing up my life, one drawer at a time, and with every box I sealed, I felt something inside me getting lighter. Not healed, not yet, but lighter. The only people I told were my 3 closest friends. Emma, who I had known since college, Marcus from work, and Beth, my neighbor, who had over the years become something like the big sister I never had. I told them where I was going and why, and each of them looked at me with some version of the same expression. Relief. Not because I was leaving, but because I was finally choosing myself. Within 6 weeks of Jessica's house post, I was living in Portland, Oregon, 3 time zones away from my family. I had a new job, a new apartment, a new phone number, a new life. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Portland felt like the kind of place you move to when you are trying to become someone you have never had room to be. The air smelled different there, damp and green and faintly like coffee, no matter where you stood. My new apartment was smaller than the one I had left in Ohio, but it felt larger somehow because every inch of it belonged to me. No family history soaked into the walls, no emotional landmines hidden in ordinary conversations, just a clean slate, a mattress on the floor for the first few nights, half-unpacked boxes, and the strange quiet that comes when no one is waiting to take something from you. My new job was challenging in the best possible way. The company had recruited me for a reason, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like the people around me actually saw what I could do. In Ohio, I had gotten used to being competent in silence, useful but rarely celebrated. In Portland, my ideas were met with interest instead of interruption. My manager asked for my input in meetings and then actually used it. My coworkers invited me to lunch and remembered details about my life. It was disorienting at first, how easy, ordinary respect could feel when you were not constantly bracing for neglect. Outside work, I started building a life that did not revolve around waiting for people to notice me. I joined a hiking group because the trails around Portland looked like postcards, and I wanted reasons to leave my apartment that had nothing to do with productivity. I signed up for pottery classes on a whim and discovered I loved the ridiculous, humbling process of trying to coax something graceful out of a spinning lump of clay. My first few bowls looked like they had survived a small earthquake, but they were mine. Messy, imperfect, handmade. There was something healing in that. A couple of months in, I started dating a guy named Jake who worked at a local brewery. He was funny in a way that felt effortless, not performative, and he had a habit of listening all the way through an answer instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. The first time he asked me about my family, I gave him the trimmed-down version. Complicated, not close, needed distance. He nodded like that made perfect sense and did not push. That alone made me like him more than I wanted to admit. For the first time in my adult life, I was building something that was entirely mine. My routines, my friendships, my little rituals, Saturday mornings with coffee and a farmer's market, rainy afternoons in pottery class, weeknight takeout with Jake after one of us had a long day, Sunday hikes where my lungs burned, and my thoughts finally slowed down enough for me to hear myself. My life stopped feeling like a waiting room. 4 months passed. Sometimes I wondered if my parents had noticed I was not responding to their calls and texts, or maybe not calls and texts anymore, since those all went to a number that no longer belonged to me. I pictured my mother sending one of her occasional guilt-laced check-ins and getting silence back. I pictured Jessica glancing at my empty social media accounts, shrugging, and moving on. Mostly, though, I assumed they either had not realized or did not care enough to make it a priority. In my mind, my absence was probably just convenient. One less person to perform fairness for. One less reminder that their family story had cracks in it. I was wrong. The first sign came in July, when Emma called me laughing so hard she could barely get words out. "Frankie," she said between breaths. "Oh my God, you need to hear this." I sat up straighter on my couch. "What happened?" "Your mom called me." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. "She what?" "Your mom called me at work. I have no idea how she got my number, but she introduced herself as Frankie's mother, Patricia Wilson, like that was supposed to mean something to me immediately." I stared at the rain sliding down my window. What did she want? What do you think she wanted? She said she was so worried because you hadn't been returning calls or texts. I let out a short laugh. It took her 4 months to notice I wasn't responding? "That's not even the best part," Emma said, sounding delighted and horrified at the same time. "She asked if I knew where you were. I told her I couldn't share that information without your permission. So then she asked if I could at least confirm that you were safe and healthy. I said yes. But then, Frankie, then she asked if I thought you were mad at them about something." I stood up and started pacing. She asked if I'm mad about something. Like she truly could not imagine what this might possibly be about. I wanted so badly to ask her if she'd forgotten your birthday again while buying Jessica another piece of real estate, but I figured that was not my lane. "Good call. What did you want me to say if she calls again?" I thought about it, about my mother's voice, how easily she could slide into concern without ever touching accountability. Nothing for now. Just keep saying I'm safe. Emma was quiet for a beat. "You know this means they're actually looking, right?" I looked around my apartment, the half-finished ceramic mug on the counter, my hiking boots by the door, the life I had built in the months since I left. "Yeah," I said slowly, "I guess they are." Emma's call was only the beginning. 2 days later, Marcus called me from Ohio, sounding somewhere between amused and irritated. "Your father found my LinkedIn." I closed my eyes. Of course he did. He sent me this whole professional-sounding message asking if I had any recent contact with you and whether I could help him understand your state of mind before you left. State of mind, Frankie. Like you're some missing heiress in a black and white movie. What did you tell him? That I wasn't comfortable sharing personal information about former colleagues and wished him the best, which for the record was me being incredibly polite. I laughed despite myself. "Thank you." Marcus's voice softened. "You okay?" "Yeah, just surprised, I guess." "You shouldn't be," he said. People hate losing access to someone they took for granted. That line stayed with me longer than I expected. Then Beth called. My mother had actually shown up at my old apartment building. Beth was in the lobby getting her mail when my mother cornered her near the elevator. She was so dramatic, Beth said. Frankie, she kept saying she was beside herself with worry and asking if I thought something terrible had happened to you. I walked over to my kitchen and leaned against the counter. What did you tell her? I said you had moved, which apparently she did not know. And then she practically grabbed my arm and asked where. She grabbed your arm. Very gently, Beth said dryly. But yes, enough to be weird. Then she lowered her voice like we were in a crime show and said, Please, I just need to know my daughter is okay. I rubbed my forehead. And? And I said I was sorry, but I couldn't help her. Then I got in the elevator and left, but Frankie, she stayed in that lobby for like 20 minutes, asking other tenants if they knew you. The reports kept coming after that, and each one was somehow more absurd than the last. My old coworkers reached out to say my parents had shown up at my former office building. Apparently, my father had worn a suit and tie and introduced himself to the receptionist as Mr. Wilson, Frankie's father, as though that title should unlock confidential employee files on command. When they told him I no longer worked there and they could not provide forwarding information, he asked to speak to my old supervisor. Poor Janet called me herself to tell me about it. Frankie, she said in the careful tone people use when they are trying not to sound too invested in workplace drama, but absolutely are. Your father sat in my office for 30 minutes asking if you had seemed depressed before you left. I nearly choked on my coffee. Depressed? He kept saying your disappearance was out of character and asking whether anyone had been bothering you or whether you seemed unstable. I kept telling him you left for a great opportunity, gave proper notice, and seemed excited, but he was very attached to the idea that something must be wrong. The irony was so sharp it almost felt funny. My father, who had not had a real conversation with me in years, was suddenly presenting himself as an expert on my emotional baseline. They had also gone to my college alumni association asking for updated contact information. A friend named Rachel, who worked there part-time, called me after my mother showed up with what she described as a whole folder of evidence. Apparently, Mom had brought my diploma, old report cards, and college photos, as if proving she was my mother would somehow make privacy laws optional. What did she say? I asked. Rachel hesitated. She said there had been a family emergency, and she desperately needed to reach you. That phrase caught my attention. Family emergency. A new angle. I wondered what crisis they had invented to justify this sudden campaign, or if in my mother's mind my absence itself had become the emergency. Either way, it was surreal. They had gone from forgetting my birthday to treating my silence like a code red situation. And beneath all of it was the question I kept turning over without wanting to. Why now? Why this energy, this urgency, this determination, when for 28 years I had been standing right in front of them asking in 100 quiet ways to matter? I did not have the answer yet, but I could feel one coming. And the deeper they dug, the clearer it became that they were not going to let this go easily. The search didn't slow down after those first calls. If anything, it started spreading in directions I hadn't even imagined. Every few days, someone else from my old life reached out with a strange new update about my parents trying to track me down. Beth called one afternoon, sounding half amused and half disturbed. Your mom got the contact information for other tenants in the building. How? I asked. No idea, but she called Mrs. Henderson from 3B. Mrs. Henderson was an elderly woman who used to water the hallway plants and wave politely whenever I passed her door. What did she say? I asked. Beth laughed quietly. Apparently your mom asked if Mrs. Henderson had noticed any suspicious activity around your apartment before you moved out. Suspicious activity? She wanted to know if you seemed scared, or if there were strange people visiting you, or if you had mentioned being followed. I leaned back on my couch, staring at the ceiling. She's building a crime scene, I muttered. That's exactly what it sounded like, Beth replied. Mrs. Henderson told her you were always polite and quiet and that you said goodbye when you moved, but your mom kept pressing like she was trying to prove something terrible had happened. The whole thing was beginning to feel surreal. My parents had apparently convinced themselves that my disappearance couldn't possibly have been a choice. In their version of events, something had to be wrong with me. Something had to be broken. Otherwise, they would have to consider the possibility that I had left because of them. And that explanation was apparently the one they refused to consider. Emma called again a few days later with another development. You're not going to believe what your dad is doing now. I'm almost afraid to ask. He's posting about you on Facebook. I blinked. Posting what? Like full-on missing person posts. Emma opened the page while we were on the phone. Oh, wow, she said slowly. Frankie, this is... This is a lot. What does it say? She cleared her throat and started reading. Still searching for my daughter, Frankie Wilson. Last seen in Ohio in March. She may be suffering from depression or memory loss. If anyone has information, please contact me immediately. We just want to know she's safe. I sat there in stunned silence. Memory loss? That's not even the weirdest one, Emma said. There's another post where he says your behavior before leaving was erratic and concerning. Erratic. Concerned. Depression. My father had turned my decision to move into a medical mystery. Emma kept scrolling. He's posted about you 15 times in the past month, she said. There are comments from strangers offering prayers, sharing similar stories, giving advice about search strategies. I could picture it perfectly. Concerned strangers trying to help locate the tragic missing daughter. While I was sitting in my Portland apartment, eating Thai takeout and planning a hiking trip, Frankie, Emma said quietly, there's something else. What? He offered a reward. I sat up straight. How much? $25,000. I laughed out loud, but the sound came out wrong. A $25,000 reward. My parents had spent years treating my emotional needs like inconveniences, but now they were offering strangers a small fortune to locate me. Are you okay? Emma asked. I don't know whether to laugh or scream. She read another post. He wrote, we love you, Frankie, and just want you to come home. Home. The word made my chest tighten in a way I didn't expect. Because that house had never really felt like home. Emma continued scrolling through the comments. There are people saying you might be in a hospital somewhere. Others are suggesting shelters. Someone told your dad to contact a missing persons TV show. And he's responding. To every comment, she said. He's thanking people for their prayers and saying the family won't give up searching. I rubbed my temples. My father had built an entire narrative where I was a fragile missing person instead of an adult who had chosen to leave. And people believed it. Can you screenshot those posts for me? I asked. Already doing it. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with the images. They were worse than Emma had described. My father had written paragraphs describing how worried they were about me, how my disappearance was out of character, how they feared something terrible had happened. He made it sound like I was lost somewhere, broken, vulnerable. The comments underneath were full of sympathy, prayers, advice, speculation. One comment read, have you checked hospitals? Sometimes people with mental health crises can't identify themselves. Another said, contact national missing persons organizations. My father had responded to both with heartfelt gratitude. Reading those posts made my stomach turn. He wasn't just searching for me. He was rewriting my story, turning my independence into instability, my choice into tragedy. And the worst part was that strangers were now invested in finding me. But the strangest twist came when Emma discovered what Jessica had been doing. She made fake accounts, Emma told me. Fake accounts? On Instagram, Facebook, even TikTok. For what? To try to find you. Jessica had created profiles pretending to be different people. One account claimed to be a travel blogger, visiting different cities and asking locals for recommendations. She's hoping you'll respond if you think it's a random traveler, Emma explained. How do you know it's her? The writing style, Emma said. Plus, I reverse searched the profile photo, and it came from a blog Jessica wrote for work. Jessica had also joined city-based Facebook groups. Seattle, Denver, Austin, Portland. Everywhere she thought I might have gone. She posted variations of the same message. Hi everyone, I'm trying to reconnect with an old friend named Frankie Wilson. She's about 28 and works in marketing. She might have moved to your city recently. People responded helpfully, but none of them had real information. Because Jessica was looking for the wrong version of me. The one who still belonged to Ohio. The one who still belonged to them. Marcus called me one evening after seeing one of the posts. Your sister is persistent, he said. That's one word for it. She's desperate to find you, so they can go back to ignoring me with a clear conscience. Marcus didn't respond right away. Then he said something that stayed with me. I'm not sure that's what this is anymore. What do you mean? I think they actually don't understand why you left. That idea bothered me more than I expected. Because if Marcus was right, then everything they were doing was driven by confusion rather than guilt. And confusion can make people do strange things. But the strangest development came in November. Emma called me again. You should sit down for this one. I'm already sitting. Your parents hired a private investigator. I stared at the wall. They what? A real one. He contacted me yesterday. Are you serious? Business cards and everything, she said. Very polite. Said he was hired by concerned parents trying to locate their missing daughter. The situation had officially crossed from absurd into something else entirely. My parents had hired a professional to investigate my life, which meant the search wasn't just emotional anymore. It had become an operation, and operations tend to uncover things. When Emma told me about the private investigator, my first reaction was disbelief. Not the kind that comes with shock, but the slow, tired disbelief you feel when something ridiculous becomes even more ridiculous. They hired an actual investigator, I repeated. Yep, Emma said. Professional guy, calm, polite, very methodical. He said he was trying to locate you on behalf of your concerned family. I rubbed my forehead. Concerned, I said quietly. He asked a lot of questions, she continued, about when you left, whether you'd mentioned feeling unsafe, whether you seemed depressed or unstable. Unstable. Yeah, Emma paused. I told him the truth, that you moved voluntarily and that you were fine. Did he believe you? He seemed satisfied that you weren't in immediate danger, she said. But Frankie, he's thorough. She wasn't exaggerating. 2 days later, Marcus called. Hey, guess who emailed me? The investigator. Bingo! Marcus said the man had reached out through LinkedIn, introducing himself politely and explaining he had been hired to determine whether Frankie Wilson might be missing under concerning circumstances. He asked me about your behavior before you left, Marcus said. Whether you seemed anxious or paranoid. Paranoid? Yeah, like they're trying to build a profile. The investigator wasn't just contacting friends. He was building a narrative, and that narrative apparently required me to be unstable. Beth confirmed the same thing. He came by the building again, she told me, asked about your habits. What kind of habits? When you left for work, when you came home, whether you had visitors, whether you ever seemed afraid. Beth sounded unsettled. He asked the same questions 3 different ways, she said, like he was trying to catch me contradicting myself. That detail made my stomach tighten, because that's exactly what investigators do when they're looking for hidden truths. But there wasn't one. I wasn't hiding. I had simply left. But my parents had turned my departure into a mystery that demanded solving. And the investigator had also dug into my digital life. Emma called again with another update. He asked about your Instagram posts. What about them? He showed me screenshots, old photos, that hiking trip you posted last year, the birthday party at Marcus's place, even that sunset photo you took. The one with the caption endings and beginnings? Yeah, Emma said. He asked if I thought that caption suggested emotional distress. I laughed. That was just a sunset. I told him that, Emma replied, but he wrote it down like it was evidence. Apparently, the investigator had even contacted my old therapist's office. Privacy laws stopped them from sharing information, but the fact that he tried meant the search had expanded into every corner of my past. My dentist's office, my college alumni association, even the yoga studio I had attended during my last year in Ohio. The whole situation began to feel invasive in a way I hadn't anticipated. It was like my entire life had been turned into a case file, every detail examined, every memory questioned, every normal decision interpreted as suspicious. But the most disturbing part wasn't the investigation itself. It was the story behind it. My parents had convinced everyone involved that something terrible had happened to me, that I hadn't left by choice, that I had been taken, or broken, or lost. It was easier for them to imagine tragedy than to face the truth, and the truth was simple. I had chosen to leave them. But the escalation didn't stop there. In January, almost a year after I disappeared from their lives, I was sitting in a coffee shop with a new coworker when my phone rang. Unknown number. Oregon area code. Normally I ignored unknown calls. But something about this one made me answer. Hello? Is this Frankie Wilson? The voice was unfamiliar. Professional. Yes. My name is Linda Rodriguez. I'm a social worker with the Oregon Department of Human Services. My heart skipped. I received a wellness check request regarding you, she said. Someone expressed concern that you might be missing or in danger. I felt the air leave my lungs. Missing? They indicated you may be living in the Portland area, she continued gently. I just need to confirm that you're safe. I'm safe, I said quickly. I moved here for work. That's what I assumed, she said. But I do need to follow up on these reports. We arranged to meet the next day at a downtown cafe. Linda turned out to be a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the tired patience of someone who had spent years sorting through family conflicts that should never have reached her desk. After confirming my identity and that I was indeed living independently, she asked the obvious question. Do you know why someone might believe you were missing? I hesitated. Family issues, I said finally. I moved without telling them. She nodded slowly. That happens more often than people think. Then she added something that made my stomach twist. The report we received claimed you might be the victim of foul play or suffering from a mental health crisis. Foul play? They said your disappearance was completely out of character and that you had been acting strangely before leaving. I stared at the table. My parents had told the police I might have been murdered, or mentally unstable. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Linda studied my expression carefully. I can see this situation might not be what they described. No, I said quietly. It isn't. Would you like to contact them to confirm you're safe? No, I answered before she finished the sentence. I'm an adult, I said. I chose to move. I don't want contact. That is absolutely your right, she said calmly. She closed the file. I'll mark the case as resolved. As she gathered her papers, she added one more thing. Whoever filed the report clearly knows you very well. They provided detailed information about your life. They think they know me, I said. That's often the difference, she replied. When she left the cafe, I stayed there for 2 hours staring at my coffee. My parents had convinced the police that I might be dead. They had turned my decision to start over into a missing persons case. And the strangest part was the realization slowly settling in. For the first time in my life, I had their full attention. Growing up, I would have done almost anything to feel the kind of concern my parents were suddenly showing. As a kid, I used to imagine what it would feel like if they worried about me the way they worried about Jessica, if they called just to check in, if they noticed when something in my life shifted even slightly, if they fought to protect me the way they always seemed ready to protect her. Now they were doing all of that. They were calling everyone I knew. They were hiring investigators. They were offering rewards. They were telling the police I might be in danger. They were finally moving heaven and earth to find me. And the cruelest part was that by the time they did, I didn't want it anymore. That realization sat with me all afternoon after meeting Linda. I walked along the riverfront in Portland, watching the gray water slide past the city skyline while trying to understand the strange mix of emotions building in my chest. There was anger, of course. There was disbelief. But underneath those things was something quieter. Relief. Because the truth had finally become undeniable. They were capable of caring. They just hadn't chosen to care when I was standing right in front of them. That night I called Emma. They filed a missing person report, I said as soon as she answered. She inhaled sharply. You're kidding. Dead serious. A social worker contacted me today. They told the police I might have been murdered. Jesus, Frankie. Yeah. Emma was quiet for a moment. That's actually scary, she said. What if they try something else? Like claiming you're mentally unstable or trying to have you committed? They can't, I said. I'm working, paying rent, living independently. There's nothing they can do legally. Still, the situation had clearly gone further than either of us expected. I need you to do something for me, I told her. Anything. I need you to call my mom. Emma hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. What do you want me to say? I leaned back on my couch and stared at the ceiling. Tell her I'm alive, tell her I'm safe, tell her I moved and started over by choice. And that's it? That's it. You don't want to talk to her yourself? I thought about it for a moment. A year earlier, I might have taken the opportunity to say everything I had bottled up for 28 years. I might have shouted about the birthday, about the house, about every holiday where I felt invisible. But I knew how that conversation would end. With excuses. With deflection. With my mother insisting she loved me and didn't understand what she had done wrong. No, I said finally. If I call her, she'll try to pull me back into the same cycle. Just tell her I'm okay and that I don't want contact. Emma sighed softly. All right. But don't tell her where I am, I added. Not the city, not my job, nothing. Of course. And if she asks why, Emma waited. Tell her to think about the difference between how they treated me and how they treated Jessica. Emma was silent. And tell her to think about my 28th birthday, I finished. And Jessica's house. The next day, Emma called my mother. Later that evening, she called me back. How did it go? I asked. Emma exhaled slowly. She cried. That's not surprising. She kept asking for your phone number. I told her I couldn't give it to her. Thank you. She asked one question, though. What? Emma hesitated. She asked what they did wrong. I laughed. But the sound that came out wasn't really laughter. What did you tell her? I repeated what you said, Emma replied. I told her to think about the difference between you and Jessica. I told her about the birthday and the house. And? She was quiet for a long time, Emma said softly. Then she said she needed to go. That was the last message that passed between me and my family. No angry phone calls. No dramatic confrontations. Just silence. At first, I expected another wave of searching. Another investigator. Another welfare check. But nothing came. Weeks passed. Then months. And slowly the quiet settled into something permanent. 8 months passed after that call. No more messages, no more investigators, no more desperate attempts to track me down through the people in my life. The silence that followed Emma's conversation with my mother felt different from the silence that had come before. This one was intentional, deliberate, as if my parents had finally reached the edge of the maze they had built and realized there was nowhere left to go. I'd like to say I never thought about them again, but that wouldn't be true. Sometimes when I was hiking through the wet, green forests outside Portland, I would catch myself wondering if they talked about me at family dinners, whether my chair at the table had been quietly erased, or whether my absence still lingered in the room like a ghost no one wanted to acknowledge. I wondered if Jessica ever looked around her new house and thought about how it had arrived in the same week her sister disappeared from their lives. But those thoughts didn't control me anymore. Most days they passed through my mind the way clouds pass over a mountain trail, visible for a moment, then gone. My life kept growing. Work promoted me to a senior marketing position that came with more responsibility and a team of younger employees who actually asked for my advice. I found that I liked mentoring people, helping them avoid the mistakes I'd had to navigate alone. Jake and I grew closer too. What started as casual brewery dates slowly turned into something steadier. We talked about moving in together eventually, though neither of us was in a hurry. I had friends now who knew me for who I actually was, not for the role I filled in someone else's story. My hiking group planned a trip to Thailand, something I never would have considered when my life revolved around family obligations in Ohio. I started taking Spanish classes just because I wanted to. Sometimes I would catch myself smiling at something small, a pottery piece that actually came out straight, a late-night conversation with Jake, a rainy walk through the city, and realized that the quiet happiness I felt used to seem impossible. The strangest part was that I had built all of it without their approval, without their attention, without their permission. And once I realized that, the last bit of emotional weight I'd been carrying finally slipped away. One evening while cooking dinner, I caught myself thinking about that moment in the coffee shop with the social worker. The moment when she explained that my parents believed something terrible must have happened to me. Back then, the idea had made me angry. Now it felt almost tragic. Because my parents had convinced themselves of a story where I was a victim who needed rescuing. The real story, that I had simply chosen to leave them behind, was apparently too painful for them to accept. Emma told me later that my mother had asked one more question during that final call. She said she just wanted to understand, Emma had said. Understand. I used to think understanding was the same thing as accountability, that if people could just see what they had done, they would change. But some people don't want understanding. They want the comfort of believing they did nothing wrong. And I finally realized something important. It wasn't my job to correct their version of the story. They could believe whatever they needed to believe. My life wasn't connected to their narrative anymore. Every now and then, I still wonder if my parents learned anything from what happened. I wonder if they eventually sat down at that big farmhouse table and talked honestly about the way they raised us. I wonder if Jessica ever admitted that the house might have been part of the reason I left. But mostly I don't wonder. Mostly I'm just happy. The truth is simple. My life now is full. I wake up in a city I chose. I go to work at a place where people respect me. I spend time with friends who show up because they want to, not because they feel obligated. And when I come home at night, the quiet in my apartment feels peaceful instead of lonely. Sometimes people ask if I regret disappearing from my family's life. I always tell them the same thing. No, because leaving forced me to discover something I might never have learned otherwise. You can't force people to value you. You can only decide whether you're willing to stay where you're invisible. To anyone who has ever felt like the forgotten child, the backup plan, the one who gets the leftovers of someone else's love, listen carefully. You are not asking for too much. Wanting to be remembered, wanting to be celebrated, wanting to feel like you matter, those are not unreasonable expectations. And if the people who are supposed to love you can't give you that, you are allowed to walk away and build something better. It might be lonely at first. It might be terrifying. But the people who truly belong in your life will show up without being asked. They will remember what matters to you because you matter to them. As for my parents, I honestly hope they learned something from everything that happened. I hope they're better to Jessica than they were to me. Though, if I'm being honest, that wouldn't take much. I hope they eventually realize that love isn't something you say once in a while when it's convenient. It's something you prove every day through the choices you make. But their journey isn't mine anymore. The moment I chose myself, everything changed. And the funny thing is, in trying so desperately to find me, my parents accidentally gave me the greatest gift they could have ever given, They proved that I was strong enough to disappear from their world, and strong enough to build a better one of my own.